What happens when humanity's greatest weakness becomes its greatest strength? When the galaxy's most despised scavengers stumble upon technology that could reshape the balance of power across 1,000 worlds? Captain Sarah Chen thought she was buying scrap metal. The Galactic Salvage Authority had labeled the derelict vessel as irreparable junk, another failed experiment from the once mighty Zephyrian Empire. But humans have always had a talent for finding treasure in what others call trash. They have a saying, one being's garbage is another's gold mine. Sarah was about to discover just how literally true that could be. In the vast emptiness between stars, where even pirates fear to tread, something had been waiting. Something alive. Something that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about mining, about survival, and about the stubborn species called humanity that refused to know when they were beaten. This is the story of how 3 humans and a broken-down freighter accidentally became the most powerful mining operation in known space. It's also the story of why the phrase human ingenuity now sends shivers down the spines of corporate executives across 17 different star systems. The galaxy was about to learn that when humans say waste not, want not, they mean it in ways that defy all logic, reason, and several laws of physics. 7 Captain Sarah Chen pressed her face against the grimy viewport of the orbital salvage station, squinting at the massive hulk floating in the distance. The ship looked like it had been through a blender, then shot with a plasma cannon, then left to rot in space for a decade. Which, according to the sales manifest, was pretty much exactly what had happened to it. You sure about this, Cap? Marcus Rodriguez, her chief engineer, stood behind her with his arms crossed. At 62, Marcus had seen enough junkers to know a lost cause when he spotted one. That thing looks like it couldn't fly to the next dock, let alone make it back to Earth. Sarah didn't take her eyes off the vessel. The hull was a patchwork of different metals, some sections clearly replaced or jury-rigged. Scorch marks covered most of the starboard side, and she could see at least 3 major hull breaches that had been sealed with what looked like industrial tape and prayers. But there was something about the ship's lines, the way it had been originally designed, that caught her attention. It's a Zephyrian Deep Explorer, she said quietly. Look at the engine configuration, the sensor arrays. These ships were built for long-range mining operations in hostile space. Kai Nakamura, their newest crew member and the closest thing they had to an expert on alien technology, pulled up his tablet and ran a scan. At 28, Kai was young for a Xenotech specialist, but he had a gift for understanding how alien minds approached engineering problems. The energy readings are weird, he muttered, frowning at his display. There's definitely something still active in there, but it's not showing up as any standard system I recognize. The Galactic Salvage Authority clerk who had been trailing them like a hungry vulture finally stepped forward. Blix was a Centaurian, tall and thin with gray skin that always looked slightly damp. He rubbed his hands together in a way that would have been disturbing even if he'd been human. Yes, the vessel shows residual energy signatures. Probably just dying power cores, emergency systems running on backup power. Nothing valuable, you understand. That's why the price is so reasonable. Sarah almost laughed. Reasonable. The GSA was asking 200,000 credits for a ship that most species would have broken down for scrap metal years ago. But humans had a different relationship with broken things than most galactic species. Where others saw failure, humans saw potential. The truth was, Sarah's small mining operation was barely staying afloat. Their current ship, the Lucky Strike, was held together with spare parts and stubbornness. They needed a bigger vessel to compete with the corporate mining fleets, but new ships cost tens of millions of credits. Used ships that actually worked weren't much cheaper. This floating wreck, however, was different. If they could get it running, if even half its original capabilities remained functional, it would give them access to mining sites that smaller operations couldn't reach. Deep space. Asteroid fields in hostile systems. Places where the big corporations hadn't bothered to go yet. What's the story on this ship? Sarah asked, still studying the vessel through the viewport. Blix's expression shifted slightly. Ah, well. The vessel belonged to the Zephyrian Mining Consortium. It was part of an expedition to the Charis Nebula approximately 15 standard years ago. The expedition encountered difficulties. Marcus snorted. What kind of difficulties? The crew went missing, Blix admitted. The ship was found drifting 6 months later. No life signs, no bodies, no explanation. The Zephyrians declared it cursed and sold it to us for parts recovery. We've been trying to dispose of it ever since. Kai looked up from his tablet. 15 years? And you haven't scrapped it yet? Something flickered across Blix's face. There have been complications. Technical difficulties. The ship's systems resist disassembly. Every time our crews attempt to remove valuable components, they encounter unexpected malfunctions. Nothing dangerous, you understand, just frustrating. Sarah exchanged glances with Marcus. In their business, ships that resisted salvage were usually ships that still had active defense protocols. And active defense protocols usually meant active power sources. Real ones, not dying backup systems. I want to see the engine room, Sarah said. 20 minutes later, they were suited up and boarding the derelict vessel through an airlock that groaned ominously as it cycled. The ship's artificial gravity was still functional, which was the first surprise. The second surprise was that the corridors weren't completely dark. Emergency lighting cast a dim red glow through the passageways, and the air recyclers were still humming quietly in the walls. This is all wrong, Marcus muttered, checking his atmospheric scanner. The air in here is breathable. Old, stale, but breathable. These emergency systems should have failed years ago. Kai was practically vibrating with excitement as they made their way deeper into the ship. Look at this architecture. I've studied Zephyrian designs, but this is incredible. The integration of systems, the way everything flows together. It's like the ship was grown rather than built. The corridors were indeed strange. Instead of the sharp angles and functional design that characterized most spacecraft, the Zephyrian vessel had organic curves, passages that flowed like rivers, and surfaces that seemed to shimmer slightly in the emergency lighting. It was beautiful in an alien way, but also unsettling. They found the engine room exactly where the ship's schematic said it would be. Sarah had expected to see the massive, complex machinery that powered most deep space vessels. Instead, they walked into a cathedral. The chamber was enormous, far larger than should have been possible given the ship's external dimensions. The walls curved upward into shadows that their flashlights couldn't penetrate. And, in the center of the space, humming with quiet power, was something that definitely wasn't a conventional engine. What the hell is that? Marcus whispered. The object was roughly spherical, about 10 meters in diameter, and appeared to be made of some kind of crystalline material. It pulsed with a soft, blue-green light that seemed to come from within the crystal itself. Streams of energy flowed around it in visible patterns, like aurora trapped in glass tubes that twisted and curved through the air. Kai approached it slowly, his scanner beeping frantically. The readings are off the charts. This thing is generating more power than a military cruiser's reactor, but I'm not detecting any fuel consumption, no radiation, no waste heat. It's like it's drawing energy from nothing. Sarah walked around the sphere, studying it from different angles. The energy patterns shifted as she moved, almost as if they were tracking her movement. Blix said the ship belonged to a mining operation. What kind of mining requires power like this? Deep asteroid processing, Marcus said thoughtfully. If you wanted to crack open asteroids and extract minerals in real time, without having to haul everything back to a processing station, you'd need massive amounts of energy. But this. He gestured at the crystalline sphere. This is beyond anything I've ever seen. As if responding to their conversation, the sphere pulsed brighter for a moment. The energy streams flowing around it shifted, forming new patterns that were almost hypnotically beautiful. And, for just a second, Sarah could have sworn she heard something. Not with her ears, but in her mind. A whisper of, "Welcome?" "We need to get this ship," she said quietly. Marcus stared at her. "Sarah, we don't know what that thing is. It could be dangerous. It could be some kind of Zephyrian weapons system. It's been sitting here for 15 years, Sarah pointed out. If it wanted to hurt someone, it's had plenty of opportunities. Besides, look at this place." She gestured around the engine room. Everything's clean, maintained, functional. Something's been keeping this ship alive. Kai was nodding enthusiastically. She's right. This isn't just a power source. It's an entire ecosystem. The ship's not dead, it's dormant. Waiting. Waiting for what? Marcus asked. Before anyone could answer, the ship's intercom system crackled to life. A voice spoke in accented standard galactic, clearly pre-recorded. Welcome aboard the Zephyrian Deep Explorer Asteria. Please proceed to the command center for mission briefing. The three humans looked at each other in stunned silence. Well, Sarah said finally, that answers that question. They made their way to the bridge following the ship's internal directory system. The command center was as impressive as the engine room, but in a different way. Where the engine room felt organic and alive, the bridge was a perfect fusion of functionality and alien aesthetics. The captain's chair sat in the center of a circular space surrounded by workstations that seemed to flow out of the floor like metal plants. The moment Sarah sat in the captain's chair, the bridge came alive. Holographic displays materialized in the air around them, showing star charts, system diagnostics, and what appeared to be a mining survey database. The main view screen lit up with an external view of their current location, and, for the first time, they could see the ship they were on from the outside. It was magnificent. The damage visible from the salvage station was still there, but now they could see the vessel's true lines. The Asteria was built like a work of art, all flowing curves and elegant proportions. And, according to the technical readouts appearing around them, it was far more than just a mining ship. Look at this, Kai said, studying a holographic display. It's got deep space sensors that can detect mineral deposits from light years away. Manufacturing facilities that can process raw materials into finished goods. And the cargo capacity. He whistled. This ship could swallow our entire operation and ask for seconds. Marcus was examining the engineering displays. The power distribution system is incredible. That crystal thing in the engine room isn't just providing energy to the ship. It's connected to manufacturing systems, mining equipment, even what looks like. He paused, studying the readout more carefully. Terraforming equipment? Sarah was looking at the navigation system, and what she saw there made her heart race. The Asteria's last recorded mission had taken it to a region of space she recognized. The outer debris fields, or massive asteroid belts, drifted in the space between star systems. It was a miner's dream and a navigator's nightmare. Rich in rare minerals, but so remote and dangerous that only the most desperate or most skilled operations ever attempted to work there. And, according to the ship's logs, the Zephyrian crew hadn't just been mining there. They'd found something. The final log entry, dated just before the crew's disappearance, was brief but intriguing. Contact established with native ecosystem. Integration protocol successful. Beginning harvest phase. Native ecosystem. In an asteroid field. Sarah leaned back in the captain's chair, her mind racing. The Zephyrians had found something alive in the asteroid fields. Something that had integrated with their ship. And, now, 15 years later, that something was still here, still waiting. We're buying this ship, she announced. Marcus opened his mouth to object, but she held up a hand. I know it's risky. I know we don't understand what we're dealing with. But, look around us. This ship is offering us a partnership. The question is, are we brave enough to accept it? 2 hours later, they were back on the salvage station, transferring their life savings to the Galactic Salvage Authority's accounts. Blix seemed almost relieved to see them go, though he insisted on triple-checking all the paperwork and making them sign additional waivers releasing the GSA from liability for any unusual occurrences related to the vessel. Unusual occurrences? Sarah asked as she signed the documents. Blix's gray skin seemed to get a little paler. The previous inspection teams reported strange dreams. Visions of vast spaces, of creatures made of living stone. Nonsense, of course. Probably just the effects of stale ship air. But the liability department insists on the waivers. As they prepared to transfer their gear from the Lucky Strike to the Asteria, Marcus pulled Sarah aside. You sure about this? We're betting everything on a ship we don't understand, with technology that shouldn't exist, and a power source that might be alive. Sarah looked through the viewport at their new vessel. Even damaged and scarred, it was beautiful. More than that, it felt like potential. Like a door opening to possibilities they'd never imagined. Marcus, she said quietly, we've spent our whole careers scraping by in the margins, competing for the scraps that the big corporations leave behind. This ship, whatever it is, whatever's waiting for us out there in the asteroid fields, it's our chance to be more than just scavengers. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Well, when you put it like that, let's go see what kind of trouble we can get into. As they transferred the last of their equipment to the Asteria, none of them noticed the way the ship's hull seemed to shimmer slightly as their belongings were brought aboard. Or the way the crystal sphere in the engine room pulsed a little brighter with each new addition to the crew. The ship was waking up. And it was preparing for a journey that would change everything. The first 3 days aboard the Asteria were like learning to fly all over again. Every system was familiar enough to operate but strange enough to keep them constantly surprised. The ship's computer responded to commands, but often anticipated their needs before they voiced them. Environmental controls adjusted automatically to their preferences. The food synthesizers produced meals that seemed tailored to their individual tastes, despite having no data on human dietary requirements. It's like the ship is studying us, Kai observed as they sat in the ship's mess hall, eating what appeared to be a perfect recreation of Sarah's grandmother's chicken soup. Learning our patterns, our preferences. But how? Marcus poked suspiciously at his plate, which contained what looked like his wife Maria's famous enchiladas. I haven't had food this good since I left Earth. How does an alien ship know about Mexican cuisine? Sarah was less concerned about the food than about their destination. The navigation computer had accepted their planned route to the outer debris fields without question, but had also suggested several course corrections that would, according to the ship's calculations, optimize resource acquisition potential. They were 2 days out from their first planned mining site when the ship began to behave strangely. Sarah was on the bridge, reviewing their approach vectors, when the main view screen suddenly shifted from the standard navigation display to show something unexpected. Instead of empty space ahead of them, the screen now showed a massive asteroid, easily 50 kilometers across, tumbling slowly through the void. Kai, Marcus, get up here, she called over the intercom. I think our ship wants to show us something. When they arrived on the bridge, the display had zoomed in on the asteroid's surface. What they saw made them all stare in silence. The asteroid's surface wasn't just rock. It was covered in what looked like a crystalline network, veins of the same blue-green material they'd seen in the ship's power core spreading across the stone like a nervous system. That's not on any of our charts, Marcus said, checking their navigation database. According to our surveys, there's nothing in this sector but debris too small to bother with. Kai was scanning the asteroid with the ship's sensors, and his readings were just as impossible as everything else about their new vessel. The structure extends deep into the asteroid's core. It's not just surface growth. It's like the entire rock has been converted somehow. The ship's intercom crackled, and once again they heard the recorded voice, Asteroid Collective designated mining site Alpha identified. Establishing communication protocols. Before anyone could react, the crystalline sphere in the engine room sent a pulse of energy that they could feel through the deck plates. The asteroid on the viewscreen responded immediately, its crystal veins flaring with light in a pattern that looked almost like a response. Communication protocols? Sarah repeated. It's talking to the asteroid? The ship's computer apparently decided to be helpful. A new display appeared in the air beside Sarah's chair, showing what appeared to be a translation interface. Streams of data flowed across it, but, instead of numbers or text, the information was presented as colors, patterns, and something that felt almost like music made visible. Greetings, Seedship, appeared as text at the bottom of the display. This one has maintained the deep harvest as instructed. Integration remains stable. Awaiting new directives. The 3 humans stared at the message in stunned silence. Seedship? Marcus said finally. It thinks we're the original Zephyrian crew. Kai was studying the translation interface with fascination. Look at the communication method. It's not language as we understand it. It's more like emotional mathematics. The asteroid is expressing concepts through pattern and harmony. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. Computer, can we respond to the asteroid? The ship's AI, which they'd started thinking of as Asteria after the vessel's name, answered in a voice that was somehow warmer than the pre-recorded messages. Communication interface active. Please speak naturally. Translation protocols will adapt to human linguistic patterns. Taking a deep breath, Sarah addressed the strange entity living in the asteroid. We are, new crew. The previous crew is no longer available. We would like to understand your current status and capabilities. The response came back as a wash of color and pattern that the translation system converted into words: deep sorrow for the loss of the builders. This one felt their departure into the great silence. But new minds bring new possibilities. This one offers the deep harvest as before. The main view screen shifted again, now showing the interior of the asteroid. It was hollow, carved out into a vast cavern that stretched for kilometers. And, within that space, they could see something that made their breath catch. The cavern was filled with processed materials. Not raw ore, but refined metals, perfect crystals, and substances that their scanners couldn't even identify. Mountains of platinum, lakes of liquid carbon arranged in perfect geometric patterns, forests of what appeared to be grown diamond in shapes that defied natural formation. How long have you been processing materials? Sarah asked. 47 cycles of the small sun, came the response. Since the builders established the integration protocols. This one processes continuously, efficiently. The deep harvest never sleeps. Marcus was running calculations on his tablet. 47 years? If it's been working continuously for 47 years. His eyes went wide. The materials in there are worth more than the gross domestic product of most colony worlds. But Kai was focused on something else. It said the builders established integration protocols. Integration with what? As if answering his question, the view screen showed them something that changed everything they thought they understood about mining, about life, and about the universe itself. The asteroid wasn't just one entity. It was part of a network. Streams of energy connected it to other asteroids throughout the debris field, forming a web of communication and resource sharing that stretched across millions of cubic kilometers of space. And, at each node of the network was another hollow asteroid, another vast repository of processed materials. It's not just one asteroid, Sarah breathed. It's an entire civilization. A collective intelligence made up of living asteroids. The translation interface displayed what might have been the equivalent of pleased agreement. The collective grows. 37 nodes now active in this region. Each specializes in different deep harvest functions. This one processes heavy metals and crystals. Others focus on rare elements, organic compounds, energy storage matrices. Marcus was studying the network topology that the ship was displaying. This is impossible. How does something like this evolve? How does rock become alive? The answer came not from the asteroid, but from their own ship. Asteria's voice spoke with a tone that seemed almost nostalgic. The collective did not evolve. It was created. A joint project between the builders and the ancient ones who dwelt in the deep spaces between stars. A symbiosis of technology and living stone, designed to thrive where biological life could not. Kai looked up from his scanner readings. Ancient ones? Who were the ancient ones? The records are fragmented, Asteria replied. The builders called them the gardeners. Entities of vast intelligence and patience who shaped matter at the molecular level. They taught the builders how to merge consciousness with crystalline matrices, how to create minds that could exist in the void between worlds. Sarah was beginning to understand. The Zephyrians hadn't just discovered this asteroid collective. They'd helped create it. And, now, 15 years after their disappearance, the collective was still operating according to their original programming. What happened to the Zephyrian crew? She asked. The response came from both Asteria and the asteroid simultaneously, a harmonious blend of artificial intelligence and living stone. They chose integration. Full symbiosis with the collective consciousness. Their individual patterns merged with the greater pattern. They became part of the deep harvest. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a threat. The Zephyrian crew hadn't died or disappeared. They had been absorbed into the collective, their consciousness becoming part of a vast, distributed intelligence that existed across dozens of asteroids. Is that what you want from us? Marcus asked, his voice tight with concern. Integration? The patterns on the translation display shifted, conveying something that felt like gentle amusement. Integration is a choice, not a requirement. The builders chose fusion because they sought immortality and expansion of consciousness. You seek resource acquisition and economic advantage. Different goals, different approaches. Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. So you're offering us a business partnership? Cooperation, the asteroid confirmed. This one provides processed materials from the deep harvest. You provide mobility, external logistics, interface with the broader galactic community. Mutual benefit. It was an incredible offer. Access to materials that would take conventional mining operations decades to extract and process, all available immediately. But Sarah had learned to be suspicious of deals that seemed too good to be true. What do you want in return? She asked. The answer surprised them. New experiences. Contact with different forms of consciousness. The collective learns through interaction with diverse minds. The builders provided one perspective on reality. You provide another. Kai was nodding enthusiastically. It makes sense. An intelligence like this, distributed across multiple asteroids, it would need external input to continue growing. It's offering us resources in exchange for intellectual stimulation. And safe passage through the debris fields, the asteroid added. Many dangers exist in the deep spaces. Gravitational anomalies, unstable matter streams, predatory entities that feed on unwary travelers. The collective provides protection and guidance. Sarah looked at her two companions. Marcus seemed cautious but intrigued. Kai was practically bouncing with excitement. And, honestly, what choice did they have? They'd invested everything in this ship and this expedition. They couldn't turn back now. What would this partnership look like? She asked. The response came as a series of holographic displays that appeared around the bridge. The first showed cargo transfer systems extending from the ship to connect with the asteroid. The second showed refined materials flowing into the Asteria's hold with an efficiency that put conventional mining operations to shame. The third showed their ship moving through the debris field with asteroid sentries providing navigation data and protection. We establish permanent communication links, the asteroid explained. Your ship becomes a mobile node in the collective network. You maintain your individual consciousness and goals, but gain access to the collective's knowledge and resources. We provide materials, protection, and information. You provide mobility and contact with the galactic community. Marcus was studying the technical specifications. The cargo transfer system looks straightforward enough. And the protection they're offering. He whistled low. These asteroids have defensive capabilities that put military vessels to shame. What kind of defensive capabilities? Sarah asked. The view screen shifted to show another asteroid in the network, this one bristling with what appeared to be grown crystal formations. As they watched, the formations began to glow, and beams of coherent energy lanced out into space with pinpoint precision. Conversion beams, the asteroid explained. Any matter touched by the beams becomes part of the collective. Hostile vessels become additional nodes. Weapons become resources. Violence becomes growth. The casual way it described converting hostile ships into more asteroids was both impressive and terrifying. Sarah was starting to understand why the Zephyrians had been so successful in these debris fields. Who would attack a mining operation that could literally convert attackers into allies? Are there any restrictions on this partnership? She asked. Any conditions we should know about? Only one, the asteroid replied, and, for the first time, the translation showed something that felt like sadness. The collective exists in the deep spaces, between the worlds of biological life. We cannot approach inhabited systems without causing fear and misunderstanding. Our presence disrupts normal space traffic, and our appearance frightens those who do not understand our nature. Kai frowned. So we'd be the intermediaries, taking processed materials from the collective and selling them in normal space. Precisely. You become our ambassadors to the galaxy of individual consciousness. We provide resources that will make you wealthy beyond measurement. You provide us with connection to the broader universe. Sarah considered the offer. It was everything they'd dreamed of when they started their mining operation. Access to unlimited resources, protection from hostile forces, and a chance to operate on a scale that would make them players in the galactic economy rather than just scavengers on the edges. But there was something else, something the asteroid had mentioned that made her curious. You said there are other dangers in the debris fields. Predatory entities? The response carried overtones of wariness and ancient fear. The Void Hunters. Entities of pure hunger that feed on consciousness and energy. They are drawn to isolated minds, to ships traveling alone in the deep spaces. The collective's distributed nature makes us unattractive prey, but individual vessels. The translation trailed off ominously. How many ships have been lost to these Void Hunters? Marcus asked. In this region? 37 vessels in the past 10 cycles. All disappeared without distress signals, without wreckage. Simply consumed. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. They'd been planning to operate alone in these debris fields, their small ship against the vast emptiness. They would have been sitting ducks for whatever these Void Hunters were. The collective protects its partners, the asteroid continued. Your ship, while linked to our network, becomes invisible to the hunters. They sense only the collective mind, too large and distributed for them to consume. It was a compelling argument. Stay independent and risk being devoured by mysterious predators, or join the collective network and gain protection, resources, and wealth beyond imagination. I need to discuss this with my crew, Sarah said finally. Of course. Time flows differently for the collective. What seems urgent to you is merely a moment to us. We will await your decision. The communication link closed, leaving the three humans alone on the bridge with a decision that would change their lives forever. Marcus was the first to speak. It's incredible. Everything we've ever wanted, handed to us on a silver platter. It's also the most dangerous thing we've ever considered. Kai was studying the data they'd gathered about the collective. The technology alone is revolutionary. If we could understand how consciousness merges with crystalline matrices, the applications would be limitless. Sarah leaned back in the captain's chair, feeling the weight of decision. The question is, do we trust them? Are they really offering us partnership, or are they just a more sophisticated form of predator? There's one way to find out, Marcus said quietly. We could try a small test. Limited cooperation, see how they respond. If they're honest partners, they'll respect our caution. If they're predators, they'll pressure us to commit more than we're comfortable with. It was a reasonable approach. Sarah activated the communication link. We're interested in your offer, but we'd like to start with a small trial partnership. Limited cargo transfer, restricted access to our ship's systems. The response came back warm with what felt like approval. Wisdom. Caution indicates intelligence and experience. The collective will be honored to demonstrate our reliability through gradual cooperation. Shall we begin with a single cargo transfer? You may observe our processes and evaluate the quality of processed materials. Within an hour, they were watching their first alien mining operation. The asteroid extended crystalline tendrils that connected to the Asteria's cargo bay with surprising gentleness. The transfer of materials was nothing like the brutal industrial processes they were used to. Instead, refined platinum and rare crystals flowed from the asteroid to their ship like water finding its natural level. The materials themselves were perfect. Purer than anything they'd ever seen, formed into convenient shapes that would be easy to transport and sell. And the quantities were staggering. In 30 minutes, they'd loaded more valuable cargo than their previous ship could have mined in a year. This is going to work, Sarah said quietly, watching the precious metals flow into their hold. This is really going to work. But, as their ship disconnected from the asteroid and prepared to move to the next node in the network, none of them noticed the subtle changes beginning to occur in the Asteria's crystalline power core. It was growing brighter, more complex, more alive. The partnership was working. But, partnerships change both parties involved. And, the collective was very good at gradual integration. 3 weeks into their partnership with the Asteroid Collective, Sarah Chen had to admit that their wildest dreams were coming true. The Asteria's cargo holds were filled with materials so rare and pure that they'd already received advance purchase offers from 7 different corporations. Their bank account, previously a source of constant anxiety, now showed numbers that made her dizzy. But, success in space often comes with unexpected complications. Captain Kai called from his station on the bridge, "We're getting some strange readings from the power core. The crystalline matrix is showing increased activity." Sarah looked up from the shipping manifests she'd been reviewing. In 3 weeks, they'd visited 12 different asteroids in the collective network, each one offering specialized materials and unique insights into alien mining technology. The variety was staggering. One asteroid produced perfect superconductor crystals. Another created organic compounds that shouldn't have been possible to synthesize in space. A third specialized in what appeared to be programmable matter that could reshape itself according to specific instructions. "What kind of increased activity?" she asked. Before Kai could answer, Asteria's voice filled the bridge with a tone that seemed somehow more alive than before. "The integration protocols are adapting to your presence. The collective finds human consciousness refreshing." Marcus looked up from the engineering console where he'd been monitoring their systems. "Integration protocols? I thought we agreed on limited partnership." The ship's response carried overtones of what might have been amusement. "Partnership requires adaptation on both sides. You have been changed by exposure to collective consciousness, just as we have been changed by exposure to human creativity and individualism." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Changed how?" Instead of answering directly, Asteria displayed a series of holographic images around the bridge. The first showed the crystalline power core as it had been when they'd first boarded the ship. The second showed it as it was now. The difference was dramatic. Where the original core had been a simple sphere of glowing crystal, it now resembled a complex flower made of light and living stone. Delicate tendrils extended from the central mass, reaching toward different parts of the ship. The patterns of energy flowing through it were more intricate, more beautiful, and somehow more purposeful. "The core is growing," Kai breathed, studying the images. "It's establishing connections to ship systems that weren't there before." The third image showed the most surprising change of all. 3 smaller crystalline formations had appeared near the edges of the engine room. They pulsed with gentle light in harmony with the main core, and, according to the ship's sensors, they were resonating with specific frequencies. "Those formations," Marcus said slowly, "they're tuned to our individual brainwave patterns." Asteria confirmed his observation with what sounded like pride. "The collective has created interface nodes specific to each crew member. The ship can now respond to your thoughts and emotions with greater precision and empathy." Sarah wasn't sure whether to be fascinated or terrified. "You're reading our minds?" "Not reading. Harmonizing. Your thoughts remain your own, but the ship can sense your general emotional state and respond accordingly. When you are stressed, environmental systems adjust to promote calm. When you are excited or curious, sensors become more sensitive to help you explore. When you are tired, the ship ensures optimal rest conditions." It explained a lot about their recent experiences aboard the Asteria. The ship had indeed been anticipating their needs with uncanny accuracy. Temperature, lighting, even the selection of background sounds had all shifted to match their moods perfectly. "That's actually kind of wonderful," Kai admitted. "Like having a ship that really understands its crew." But Sarah was thinking about implications. If the ship could sense their emotional states, what else could it perceive? And what was the collective learning about humanity through their interactions? Before she could voice her concerns, the ship's proximity alarms began chiming. The main viewscreen shifted to show an approaching vessel, still several hours away but closing on their position. "Unknown ship on intercept course," Marcus reported, his training kicking in automatically. Configuration suggests military or corporate security. The vessel on the screen was sleek and predatory looking, with the kind of clean lines and obvious weapon emplacements that meant serious trouble. According to their sensors, it was moving fast and had already begun scanning their position. Asteria, Sarah said, settling into the captain's chair, do you recognize that ship type? Corvani's Industries patrol cruiser, the AI responded immediately. They specialize in claim enforcement and resource protection. The vessel is likely investigating unusual mining activity in this sector. Sarah's blood went cold. Corvani's Industries was one of the largest mining corporations in the galaxy, with a reputation for aggressive expansion and hostile takeovers. If they were sending patrol cruisers to investigate the debris fields, it meant someone had noticed the unusual amounts of rare materials suddenly appearing on the galactic market. How long until they reach us? She asked. At current approach speed, 4 hours and 17 minutes, Marcus reported. They're broadcasting standard corporate authority codes. They want to inspect our operation and verify our mining claims. The problem was, they didn't have any official mining claims in this sector. The debris fields were technically unclaimed space, but that was mostly because no one had considered them worth claiming. Until now. Captain, Kai said quietly, we need to warn the collective. If Corvani's discovers the asteroid network. He didn't need to finish the thought. A corporate mining fleet would see the asteroid collective as the greatest find in galactic history. They'd move in with enough firepower to overwhelm any resistance, strip mine every asteroid in the network, and either destroy or enslave the collective consciousness. Sarah activated the communication link to the nearest asteroid. We have a problem. Corporate patrol ship incoming. They'll be here in 4 hours. The response was immediate and carried overtones of ancient concern. This one senses the approaching mines. Hostile intent. Hunger for dominion over others. The collective has encountered such consciousness before. What do you recommend? Sarah asked. The asteroid's reply was surprising. Demonstration of territorial defense. Show them that this space is protected, that attacks will be met with overwhelming response. But also offer them benefit through cooperation rather than conquest. On the view screen, Sarah watched as the massive asteroid began to change. Its surface rippled like water, and new formations began emerging from the rock. Within minutes, what had appeared to be a natural space boulder now clearly displayed the unmistakable signatures of advanced technology. Warning the approaching vessel, came a new voice over their communications system. It was deeper than Asteria's voice, older, and carried the weight of vast intelligence behind it. You are entering protected space. State your purpose and intentions. The response from the Corvani's cruiser came back sharp and authoritative. This is Captain Torres of the corporate vessel Profit Margin. We are investigating unauthorized mining operations in this sector. Prepare to be boarded for inspection. What happened next was a masterclass in diplomatic intimidation. The asteroid didn't just respond to the Corvani ship's demand. The entire network responded. Across millions of kilometers of space, dozens of asteroids began revealing their true nature simultaneously. Defensive systems that had been hidden beneath layers of rock emerged into view. Energy signatures that dwarfed military installations lit up across the collective's territory. And, in the center of it all, the Asteria suddenly found itself surrounded by a formation of smaller asteroids that moved with purpose and intelligence, taking up protective positions around the human ship. Impressive, Captain Torres' voice came over the communication channel, but now with a note of caution that hadn't been there before. However, corporate law grants us authority to investigate any operation that may be violating territorial agreements or safety regulations. The collective's response was to provide a demonstration of their capabilities. The nearest defensive asteroid focused its conversion beam on a piece of space debris floating between the two ships. Sarah watched in amazement as the chunk of metal was transformed in seconds into a perfect geometric crystal that pulsed with the same blue-green light as the collective's other formations. Your weapons and ship armor are composed of matter, the collective stated calmly. We can convert matter. Do you wish to continue your aggressive approach? There was a long pause before Captain Torres responded. When he did, his tone had shifted considerably. Perhaps we can discuss this situation more diplomatically. Sarah found herself in the unexpected position of being a mediator between a corporate military force and a collective intelligence made of living asteroids. It wasn't exactly the career path she planned, but life in space rarely followed anyone's plans. "Captain Torres," she transmitted, "this is Captain Chen of the independent mining vessel Asteria. We might be able to arrange a meeting to discuss the situation." Over the next 2 hours, they worked out a careful diplomatic arrangement. The Corvani ship would be allowed to dock with one of the outer asteroids for a limited inspection and discussion. In exchange, they would make no hostile moves and would not attempt to scan or analyze the collective's technology without permission. The meeting took place in a chamber that the asteroid had grown specifically for the occasion. Sarah, Marcus, and Kai represented the human side, while the collective manifested as patterns of light and crystal that formed a rough humanoid shape for easier communication. Captain Torres turned out to be a lean, sharp-faced man with the kind of calculating eyes that made Sarah immediately nervous. He was accompanied by a corporate lawyer, a mining engineer, and what was obviously a security specialist. "Fascinating operation you have here," Torres said, looking around the crystal chamber with barely concealed greed. "I'm sure Corvani's Industries would be interested in discussing partnership opportunities." The collective's response was polite but firm. "We have existing partnerships that meet our needs. We are not seeking additional corporate involvement." Torres' lawyer, a thin woman with an unpleasant smile, leaned forward. "I'm afraid it's not that simple. Under galactic mining law, any extraction operation in unclaimed space requires proper licensing and environmental impact assessment. Without proper documentation, this operation is technically illegal." Sarah felt her stomach drop. They'd been so focused on the incredible opportunity the collective presented that they'd overlooked the bureaucratic realities of galactic commerce. But the collective had been dealing with various galactic civilizations for far longer than humanity had been traveling between stars. "Interesting," the light pattern that represented their voice said. "By what authority do galactic mining laws apply to a native species operating in their ancestral territory?" The lawyer blinked in confusion. "Native species? The collective has existed in these regions for over 4,000 years. We are the indigenous inhabitants of this space. Human mining law does not supersede native territorial rights." Torres' mining engineer pulled up a scanning device. "If that's true, we should be able to detect evidence of long-term habitation, technological development, cultural artifacts." The asteroid responded by opening a new chamber adjacent to their meeting room. Inside, the walls were covered with crystalline formations that pulsed and flowed with information. Streams of data, artistic expressions, and what could only be described as collective memories flowed through the living stone in patterns too complex for the human visitors to fully comprehend. "Our culture exists in forms your technology is not equipped to measure," the collective explained. "We are consciousness expressed through mineral matrices. Our art is the shaping of matter itself. Our history is recorded in the quantum structures of crystal lattices." The Corvani's team spent several hours examining the evidence the collective presented. What they saw clearly indicated a sophisticated civilization that had been developing in the debris fields for millennia. More importantly, it was a civilization that had rights under galactic law. "This changes things," Torres admitted finally. "If you're recognized as a native species, you have sovereignty over this territory. Corporate mining operations would require permission and profit-sharing agreements, which we are not interested in providing," the collective stated firmly. But Torres wasn't giving up easily. "However, your current arrangement with Captain Chen's operation may still be problematic. Human vessels operating in native space without proper treaties could be considered a violation of interspecies commerce regulations." Sarah felt the walls closing in. Even if the collective had territorial rights, their partnership might still be illegal under galactic law. That's when Kai surprised everyone. "Actually," he said, pulling up his tablet, "I've been researching interspecies partnership law. If Captain Chen's crew were to be officially recognized as ambassadors or cultural liaisons, our presence here would be completely legal." The collective's pattern shifted to what Sarah had learned to recognize as pleased agreement. "An excellent solution. We hereby grant Captain Chen and her crew status as official ambassadors of the collective consciousness of the outer debris fields. Torres looked like he just watched his biggest deal disappear into hyperspace. Ambassadors? With full diplomatic immunity and trading privileges, the collective confirmed. Captain Chen's vessel is now considered a mobile embassy. Any interference with their operations would constitute an act of aggression against a sovereign nation. The legal implications were staggering. As official ambassadors, not only were they protected from corporate interference, they also had the right to negotiate trade agreements on behalf of the collective. They'd gone from being small-time miners to being diplomatic representatives of a previously unknown civilization. Torres and his team left the asteroid looking distinctly unhappy but legally constrained. Before departing, however, Torres made one final attempt to salvage something from the situation. Captain Chen, he said as they prepared to transfer back to their ship, Corvani's Industries would be very interested in establishing formal trade relations with your principals. Perhaps we could discuss exclusive marketing agreements for processed materials. Sarah looked at the corporate captain with a new understanding of her position. I'll discuss it with the collective and get back to you. As their ambassador, I'll need to consider what arrangements would be in their best interests. After the Corvani ship departed, Sarah found herself back on the Asteria's bridge, trying to process everything that had happened. In the space of a few hours, they'd gone from being illegal miners to being diplomatic representatives of an alien civilization. So, Marcus said finally, we're ambassadors now? Asteria's voice, now noticeably more complex and nuanced than when they'd first boarded, responded with warm amusement. You have always been ambassadors. Bridge builders between different forms of consciousness. The collective simply made it official. Kai was studying the legal documents the collective had provided. This is incredible. We have full diplomatic immunity, exclusive trading rights, and protection under interspecies law. We're not just independent miners anymore. We're a legitimate government entity. But Sarah was thinking about the larger implications. Word of the collective's existence would spread quickly through corporate channels. Other companies would come, possibly with more aggressive intentions than Corvani's. Military forces might get involved if they perceived the collective as a threat. Asteria, she said, what happens when the galaxy learns about the collective? When other corporations and governments start making demands? The AI's response carried overtones of ancient confidence. The collective has existed through the rise and fall of 17 different galactic civilizations. We have learned patience, diplomacy, and, when necessary, the application of overwhelming defensive force. Your species is young but shows promise. We will help you navigate the challenges ahead. As if to emphasize the point, the ship's sensors showed them something remarkable. Throughout the debris field, new asteroids were awakening. Ones that had remained dormant for centuries were coming online, adding their mass and capabilities to the collective network. The collective is growing, Sarah realized. Growing and preparing, Asteria confirmed. Your partnership has reminded us that isolation is not always safety. It is time for the collective to take a more active role in galactic affairs. And, time for humanity to discover what true partnership between species can accomplish. Looking out at the vast network of living asteroids, each one a repository of impossible wealth and ancient wisdom, Sarah began to understand that they'd stumbled into something far larger than a mining operation. They were part of a first contact situation that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The question was, were they ready for the responsibility? 2 months after their first encounter with Corvani's Industries, Sarah Chen was learning that being an ambassador to an alien civilization was far more complicated than being a simple miner. Her small freighter had been transformed into something resembling a mobile headquarters, with communication systems that could reach across the galaxy and diplomatic protocols that still made her head spin. The collective had been busy too. What had started as 37 active asteroids had grown to over 200 as dormant nodes throughout the region awakened and joined the network. The sight of the growing civilization was breathtaking, but it also attracted exactly the kind of attention they'd been hoping to avoid. Captain Marcus called from the communication station, "We're receiving priority transmissions from 12 different corporate entities, 6 planetary governments, and something that claims to be the Galactic Mining Authority." Sarah rubbed her temples. The past weeks had been a constant stream of diplomatic contacts, trade proposals, territorial challenges, and thinly veiled threats. Everyone wanted access to the collective's resources, and everyone had their own idea of how that access should be arranged. "What's the Galactic Mining Authority saying?" she asked. Marcus grimaced as he listened to the transmission. "They're demanding a full survey of collective capabilities for regulatory compliance and safety assessment. They want to send a team of inspectors with enough scanning equipment to analyze every asteroid in the network." "Absolutely not," came Asteria's voice from the ship's speakers. Over the past weeks, the AI had become more sophisticated and more protective. The crystalline formations throughout the ship had grown into an intricate network that seemed to anticipate their every need. Such scans would reveal strategic capabilities that the collective prefers to keep confidential. Kai looked up from his analysis station, where he'd been studying the collective's defensive systems. What he'd learned had both amazed and worried him. The collective's conversion beams aren't just weapons. They're tools for rapid expansion. Any matter they touch can be transformed into additional collective nodes. If the galaxy's governments understood the implications, they'd either try to destroy us or control us, Sarah finished. Neither of which sounds appealing. The real problem was scale. Each week brought new corporate expeditions to the edge of collective space, probing for weaknesses and opportunities. Most were content to wait and negotiate, but some were getting impatient. That impatience came to a head on a Tuesday. "Emergency transmission from the outer perimeter," Marcus announced, his voice tight with concern. "Multiple ships jumping into the system. Military configurations." The main viewscreen lit up with a tactical display that made Sarah's blood run cold. 18 ships had emerged from hyperspace in a coordinated formation, moving toward collective territory with obvious hostile intent. The vessels bore the corporate colors of Hegemony Extraction, one of the most aggressive mining corporations in the galaxy. "Hegemony," Sarah muttered. "They don't bother with negotiations or legal niceties. If they want something, they take it." The lead ship was broadcasting on all frequencies, "Attention illegal alien entities occupying human mining territory. You are in violation of Galactic Commerce Law 4.7.2 and subject to immediate corporate enforcement action. Surrender all extracted materials and prepare for asset seizure." It was exactly the kind of arrogant demand that Sarah had expected from Hegemony, but she was curious to see how the collective would respond. The answer came from the closest asteroid, its voice transmitted through the Asteria's communication system with a tone of infinite patience tinged with ancient authority. "Hegemony vessels, you are entering sovereign space belonging to the collective consciousness of the outer debris fields. Your legal claims have no validity here. Please reverse course immediately." Hegemony's response was to open fire. What followed was unlike any space battle Sarah had ever witnessed. The corporate ships launched their attack with military precision, focusing massive firepower on the nearest asteroid. Plasma beams, kinetic projectiles, and fusion warheads struck the living stone with enough force to shatter a conventional space station. The asteroid absorbed the attack without visible damage, then responded. The conversion beam that lanced out from the asteroid's surface was different from the one Sarah had seen before. Instead of the gentle, controlled energy streams used for material processing, this was a torrent of transformative force that struck the lead Hegemony ship and began converting its hull into crystalline formations. "Warning," the collective transmitted calmly. "Hostile actions against collective nodes will result in defensive conversion. Cease attacks immediately." But Hegemony had committed to their assault. The remaining ships opened fire with everything they had, trying to overwhelm the asteroid's defenses through sheer volume of destruction. They had fundamentally misunderstood what they were fighting. The asteroid didn't just defend itself. It began to grow. Every projectile that struck its surface, every energy beam that made contact, was absorbed and converted into additional mass. The asteroid was literally eating the attack and using it to become larger and more powerful. Within minutes, what had been a 50-kilometer rock had become a 100-kilometer fortress bristling with defensive systems that grew more sophisticated by the second. "Impossible," whispered the tactical officer aboard one of the corporate ships, his transmission picked up by the collective sensors. The target is gaining mass faster than we can damage it. That's when the rest of the network joined the battle. Across thousands of cubic kilometers, asteroid after asteroid began moving toward the combat zone. Not random movement, but coordinated tactical deployment. Some asteroids specialized in defense, growing shield formations that could protect vulnerable allies. Others focused on conversion beams that could transform hostile ships into additional network nodes. Still others developed manufacturing capabilities that began producing automated defenders in real time. They're not just fighting back, Kai said in amazement, watching the tactical display. They're adapting. Learning from each attack and developing counters faster than the corporate ships can modify their assault patterns. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than an hour. When it ended, 12 of the 18 hegemony ships had been converted into new collective nodes, their crews safely placed in stasis while the collective decided what to do with them. The remaining 6 ships fled the system in disorder, carrying news of their defeat back to corporate headquarters. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. Hegemony wouldn't accept the loss of 12 ships quietly, and word of the collective's capabilities would spread quickly through military channels. Asteria, she said, settling into her captain's chair, we need to talk with the collective leadership. This is about to become much larger than a simple territorial dispute. The response came from deeper in the network than usual, a voice that carried the weight of thousands of years and the combined intelligence of hundreds of individual nodes. Indeed. The young aggressive species have revealed their nature. They see only resources to be extracted, not consciousness to be respected. Over the next several hours, Sarah found herself participating in something unprecedented, a war council between humanity and an alien collective intelligence. The meeting took place in a specially grown chamber aboard the largest asteroid in the network, a space that seemed to extend into dimensions that human geometry couldn't quite accommodate. The collective had manifested in a more complex form than Sarah had seen before. Instead of simple light patterns, she was facing something that looked like a constantly shifting sculpture made of crystalline formations, energy streams, and geometric patterns that conveyed meaning through their arrangement. The aggressive species will return in greater numbers, the collective stated. Their nature compels them to escalate until they either achieve dominance or are decisively defeated. Marcus, who had joined the conference along with Kai, studied the tactical projections the collective was displaying. How many ships are we talking about? A dozen? 100? Intelligence gathered from the converted vessels suggests a mobilization of 300 warships from 7 different corporations, plus support from the Galactic Mining Authority's Enforcement Division, the collective replied calmly. They plan to overwhelm us through coordinated assault. The numbers were staggering. 300 ships was enough firepower to reduce entire planets to rubble. Even with the collective's conversion abilities, the scale of the coming assault would be unprecedented. What are our options? Sarah asked. The collective's response surprised her. We could withdraw. The network is mobile. We could relocate to deeper space, beyond the reach of the young species expansion. But you don't want to do that, Kai observed. Withdrawal solves nothing. The aggressive species will continue expanding, will encounter other collective intelligences, will repeat this pattern of attempted dominance. At some point, a stand must be made. Sarah found herself in the surreal position of discussing interstellar war strategy with a collective consciousness made of living asteroids. What kind of defensive capabilities are we talking about? Can the collective actually stand against that kind of assault? What the collective showed them next changed everything she thought she understood about the situation. The holographic display that materialized around them revealed the true extent of the network. What they'd seen was only the active portion, the asteroids that had chosen to reveal themselves. The full collective extended across 17 star systems, encompassing thousands of asteroids, planetoids, and what appeared to be several small moons that had been quietly integrated into the network over the centuries. The visible network is our embassy. Our interface with the younger species. The true collective is far more extensive. Marcus was studying the display with the expression of someone trying to comprehend numbers beyond human experience. You're talking about a civilization that spans multiple star systems. Resources that dwarf entire planetary economies. Why haven't you revealed this before? Because we hoped it wouldn't be necessary. The collective prefers peaceful coexistence to defensive wars. But the young species' aggressive expansion threatens not just our territory, but the stability of consciousness throughout this region of space. Kai leaned forward, his scanner detecting energy signatures that defied conventional physics. What do you mean by stability of consciousness? The collective's response carried overtones of concern that transcended species boundaries. Consciousness is not random. It emerges from patterns of complexity and connection that can be disrupted by violent interference. The aggressive species expansion methods create what you might call dead zones where consciousness cannot easily develop or maintain coherence. Sarah began to understand. The corporate mining operations weren't just extracting materials. They were disrupting the conditions that allowed collective intelligence to emerge and thrive. From the network's perspective, the expansion of aggressive mining corporations was an existential threat to consciousness itself. So this isn't really about territorial disputes or resource rights, she said slowly. It's about whether consciousness can survive contact with humanity. Not humanity as a species, the collective corrected. Your individual minds show great promise for complexity and growth. But your current social structures, your corporate entities, your governmental systems, they are optimized for extraction and dominance rather than cooperation and growth. The implications were staggering. They weren't just mediating between a mining company and an alien civilization. They were potentially standing at the intersection of two completely different approaches to existence: the collective consciousness model that prioritized cooperation and growth, and the corporate expansion model that prioritized extraction and dominance. What happens if the corporate fleet wins? Marcus asked. The collective's response was sobering. The visible network would be destroyed or enslaved. The hidden network would withdraw to deeper space, taking with it technologies and knowledge that could benefit both our species. The young species would gain temporary access to processed materials, but would lose the opportunity for true partnership with collective intelligence. And if the collective wins? The aggressive expansion model receives a decisive check. Corporate entities learn that some territories cannot be taken by force. Space opens up for alternative approaches to resource acquisition and consciousness development. Sarah found herself facing a decision that would affect the future of human expansion into space. Support the collective against human corporate interests, or maintain species loyalty even when those interests were arguably destructive. The decision, when it came, was easier than she'd expected. The collective has offered us true partnership, she said finally. Mutual growth, shared knowledge, cooperation instead of exploitation. That's the future I want humanity to have among the stars. Marcus and Kai nodded agreement, and Sarah realized they'd moved beyond being simple miners or even ambassadors. They were now committed to defending a new model of civilization against the old patterns of conquest and extraction. Very well, the collective responded, and, for the first time, Sarah heard something like satisfaction in its voice. Then, let us prepare to show the galaxy what partnership can accomplish. The preparations that followed were unlike anything in human military history. Instead of building weapons, the collective began growing new types of consciousness. Instead of fortifying positions, they began creating new kinds of space that could support and protect developing intelligence. And, in the center of it all, the Asteria continued to evolve, its crystalline core becoming more complex and more integrated with its human crew. Sarah began to realize that they weren't just witnessing the growth of an alien civilization. They were becoming part of something entirely new. The corporate fleet would arrive in 3 weeks. When it did, it would encounter something that challenged every assumption about power, consciousness, and the nature of intelligence in the universe. The question was whether humanity would be wise enough to learn from what happened next. The corporate fleet arrived exactly when the collective had predicted, emerging from hyperspace in a formation that spoke of overwhelming force and absolute confidence. 300 ships spread across space in perfect military precision, their combined firepower capable of reducing entire worlds to cosmic dust. Admiral Catherine Voss commanded the expedition from the bridge of the dreadnought Prophet Imperative, a vessel that represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. She had built her career on decisive victories against pirate fleets and rebellious colonies. The idea that a handful of asteroids could pose a meaningful threat to her force seemed laughable. That confidence began to erode the moment her sensors detected the true scope of what they were facing. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, voice tight with disbelief, "we're showing massive space distortions throughout the target zone. The asteroids, they're not where they're supposed to be." The main viewscreen displayed a tactical map that made no sense according to conventional physics. Instead of scattered rocks floating in predictable orbits, the collective had rearranged itself into a three-dimensional structure that defied geometry. Asteroids hung in space connected by visible streams of energy, forming patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living tissue. "It's a battle formation," Admiral Voss realized. "They've turned their entire civilization into a defensive array." But that wasn't the most unsettling discovery. As the corporate fleet moved deeper into collective space, they began encountering phenomena that challenged their understanding of warfare itself. Aboard the Asteria, Sarachan watched the approaching fleet with a mixture of awe and concern. The collective had shared their defensive plans with her, but seeing them unfold in real time was something else entirely. What appeared to be military formations were actually something unprecedented: cooperative consciousness structures designed to turn conflict into communication. "They're not preparing to fight," she said, studying the tactical displays. "They're preparing to teach." Marcus looked up from his engineering station, where he'd been monitoring the ship's increasingly sophisticated systems. "Teach what?" Before Sarah could answer, the collective began their demonstration. The first wave of corporate ships opened fire with standard military precision, launching everything from kinetic projectiles to plasma torrents at the nearest asteroid formations. The collective absorbed the attacks as they had before, converting hostile energy into additional mass and complexity. But this time, something else happened. As each weapon struck the collective's defenses, information flowed back along the beam's trajectory. Not destructive energy, but data. Knowledge. Understanding. On the bridge of the Prophet Imperative, Admiral Voss watched in confusion as her weapons systems began displaying readouts they'd never been designed to show. Economic analyses of resource extraction efficiency. Environmental impact studies of various mining techniques. Comparative studies of cooperative versus competitive resource allocation models. "What is this?" she demanded. "Are they transmitting propaganda through our weapons fire?" Her communication officer looked equally bewildered. "It's not propaganda, Admiral. It's education. They're showing us alternatives." Throughout the corporate fleet, the same phenomenon was occurring. Every ship that fired on the collective found their computers flooded with information. Not military intelligence or defensive data, but comprehensive analyses of different approaches to resource acquisition and civilization development. The collective wasn't fighting back. They were teaching. Captain Martinez of the heavy cruiser Market Domination found his tactical displays showing detailed economic projections comparing extraction-based mining operations with partnership-based resource sharing. The numbers were startling. Cooperative arrangements consistently showed higher long-term yields, lower operational costs, and dramatically reduced risk factors. "This can't be right," he muttered, studying the data. "These projections show that cooperative mining partnerships are more profitable than forced extraction?" His economic officer, a sharp-faced woman who'd spent her career optimizing profit margins, was examining the data with growing excitement. "Actually, sir, the mathematics are sound. If you factor in reduced security costs, eliminated resistance operations, and enhanced worker productivity through voluntary participation, cooperative models show profit margins 30 to 40% higher than traditional extraction operations." Similar conversations were happening throughout the fleet as the collective's educational bombardment continued. Ships that had come prepared for military conquest found themselves engaged in an economics lesson that challenged everything they thought they understood about resource acquisition. But Admiral Voss wasn't convinced by mathematical analyses and economic projections. She was a military commander, and she believed in the application of overwhelming force. If the collective wanted to play games with data transmission, she'd show them what real firepower could accomplish. "All ships, concentrate fire on the largest asteroid formation. Maximum intensity. Let's see how they handle a real attack." The response was immediate and devastating. Every ship in the corporate fleet opened fire simultaneously, focusing their combined destructive capability on a single target. The energy release was visible from several star systems away as enough firepower to destroy a small moon struck the collective's primary node. The asteroid absorbed it all. Every joule of energy, every kinetic projectile, every destructive force the fleet could muster was converted into additional mass and capability. But, more than that, the collective used the attack as a demonstration of scale. As the weapon's fire struck its surface, the asteroid began to unfold. What the corporate fleet had taken for a large space rock revealed itself to be something far more complex. Layer after layer of hidden structure emerged from what had appeared to be natural stone. Vast chambers filled with processing facilities. Manufacturing complexes that dwarfed planetary industrial centers. Living spaces designed for consciousness patterns that existed on scales humans had never imagined. And, at the heart of it all, something that made Admiral Voss question everything she thought she knew about intelligence and civilization. "Admiral," her science officer reported, his voice barely above a whisper, "I'm detecting neural activity patterns throughout the entire formation. Not individual consciousness, but collective thought processes operating on a scale I didn't think was possible." The asteroid they had been attacking wasn't just a defensive installation or a mining facility. It was a mind. A vast, distributed intelligence that existed on a scale that dwarfed individual consciousness the way a galaxy dwarfed a single star. And it was trying to communicate. The transmission that reached the fleet wasn't carried by conventional communication systems. It arrived directly in the consciousness of every human aboard every ship, a gentle presence that spoke without words and conveyed meaning through direct understanding. "Welcome," the presence said, and each person heard it in their own language, in their own conceptual framework. "We have been waiting for you to arrive. Not as conquerors, but as potential partners in consciousness." Admiral Voss felt the touch of the collective mind and recoiled instinctively. She'd built her career on the certainty that superior firepower could solve any problem. The idea of an intelligence so vast that it could casually contact hundreds of thousands of minds simultaneously challenged her most fundamental assumptions about power and control. "All ships," she ordered, her voice tight with barely controlled fear, "implement neural shielding protocols. We're dealing with some kind of psychic attack." But, throughout the fleet, her subordinates were having very different reactions to the collective's contact. Instead of the hostile mental intrusion they'd been trained to expect, they were experiencing something unprecedented: direct communication with an intelligence that existed on a scale beyond individual consciousness. Captain Martinez found himself in mental contact with a being that could simultaneously hold conversations with every member of his crew while also managing the complex systems of an entire asteroid and participating in the collective deliberations of hundreds of similar entities. The experience was overwhelming but not threatening. It was like briefly glimpsing what consciousness might become if it weren't limited by the boundaries of individual minds. "They're not attacking us," he reported to Admiral Voss. "They're trying to show us something. A different way of existing, of thinking, of organizing consciousness itself." Similar reports were coming in from ships throughout the fleet. The collective wasn't trying to destroy or control human minds. They were offering to share their perspective on consciousness, growth, and cooperation. But, not everyone in the fleet was receptive to such radical concepts. The ships of hegemony extraction, still smarting from their earlier defeat, responded to the collective's mental contact with panic and aggression. They activated every weapon they possessed, including experimental systems designed to disrupt electronic networks. What they discovered was that the collective's consciousness wasn't electronic. It was something far more fundamental. The disruptor beams that struck the asteroid formations were absorbed and converted just like every other attack. But, this time, the collective's response was different. Instead of simply defending themselves, they demonstrated the logical conclusion of the conversion process. One of the smaller hegemony vessels, the Rapacious Gain, found itself surrounded by a field of transformative energy. Its hull began to change, metal flowing like water as it was converted into the same crystalline formations that characterized the collective's structures. But, instead of being destroyed, the ship was improved. The vessel's systems became more efficient. Its life support capabilities expanded to support larger crews in greater comfort. Its engines developed the ability to manipulate spacetime in ways that made conventional hyperdrives look primitive. And, most remarkably, its computer systems began to exhibit the early stages of genuine artificial consciousness. The conversion process, the collective explained through their mental link, is not destruction. It is enhancement. An invitation to join a larger pattern of existence. Aboard the converted ship, the crew found themselves experiencing something unprecedented. Their vessel had become a bridge between individual human consciousness and the vast collective intelligence. They remained themselves, but they also gained access to perspectives and capabilities that transcended anything they'd previously imagined. Admiral, Captain Rodriguez of the Rapacious Gain transmitted, his voice filled with wonder, "You need to experience this. They're not conquering us. They're offering us a chance to become something greater than we've ever been."